Hi.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to St Peter Mancroft, whether you're here in person or watching online. If you are here, you're very welcome to carry on your visit. I'll be talking a little bit as part of our weekly set of reflections at this time, part of a programme of prayer or service which happens at 1 o'clock every weekday here in St Peter Mancroft. I'm Catherine Waddams and I'm a lay minister here. And today I want to talk about riots and Refugee Week. An EDP headline caught my eye back in February. Leicester murderer went on the run from HMP Norwich. It caught my eye because I lived in Leicester for 30 years, the longest I've lived anywhere, though Norwich is catching up after 26 years here. And my children were both born in the Leicester Royal Infirmary and grew up in the city. They've both lost the slight East Midlands accents they had in childhood, but they both fill in Leicester as their place of birth on all those forms, and as it happens, my son is soon moving back into the area. But though his original location made the headline, I was interested that there was no backlash against Leicester people in general in the light of this murderer's escape. I found that the rate of crimes involving knives is slightly higher in Leicestershire than across England as a whole. So perhaps there should be particular concern about people like me and my children who come into Norwich from that county. The number of crimes is small, it's less than 0.1% of the Leicestershire population, but I don't suppose that's much comfort to someone who's been directly affected by such violence or fears that there will be. And though there was no backlash against Leicester people in general in the light of this murderer's escape into our community, as it turned out, he went straight back to the East Midlands and turned himself in Northampton quite soon afterwards. But that lack of focus on his origin contrasts quite sharply with the two appalling attacks that we've seen in the news in the past week. The one which killed Henry Novak in Southampton 6 months ago, where the police mistakenly thought he had racially abused the man who turned out to have been his attacker, and the knife attack on a man in Belfast on Monday night. The violence which each of these men used and the suffering they inflicted on their victims is horrific. Like that Leicester murderer, both attacked their victim with knives. And the police misunderstanding and errors in the arrest of Henry Novak are rightly subject to investigation. But in both of these recent attacks, the identity of the attackers, a British Sikh man who had been born in the UK and a Somali refugee who has been given asylum here for 5 years, that's what's been the focus of attention, of social media excitement, and indeed behind the riots. These riots have been in Southampton, Belfast, across Scotland. Our pictures show groups of young men, many masked, who, it seems, are as much there for the riot as for the cause. But there is no doubt that they are expressing real concerns, perhaps felt as much in the heart as in the head by many people, as the recent support for the anti-immigration stance of the Reform Party show, not least here in Norfolk, where they control the county council, if less so in Norwich itself. Implicitly and sometimes explicitly, a group is seen as a threat because one person with that characteristic committed a crime. The Sikh community has felt victimized because of the identity of Henry's attacker, despite his family specifically pleading that this shouldn't happen. And because the attacker in Belfast was an immigrant with leave to remain for 5 years, the anti-immigration rhetoric has become louder and more insistent. And as a result, there have been appalling attacks putting lives at risk, children having to be rescued from burning homes. It isn't realistic to assume that no immigrant will get involved in crime, especially given the trauma which leads many people to seek asylum here. So I wondered whether crime is indeed more prevalent among immigrant groups, as much of the publicity implies. I looked at some more headlines. The Centre for Migration Control declares that there were over 100,000 foreign national convictions in just 3 years. They happen to be the years 2001 to 2003. I looked up some more recent data which shows that about the same proportion of immigrants are in prison as non-immigrants. And if you take into account the fact that more immigrants are young men, and young men in both groups are more likely to be convicted of crimes than other people, the crime rate is actually lower for immigrants than for native Brits. And it varies by crime type. Oxford University's Migration Observatory reports that non-citizens are overrepresented among convicted or incarcerated offenders for drug offences, for example, while underrepresented, i.e. there are fewer non-citizens, among those convicted or incarcerated for robbery or violence against the person, which may be the sort of crimes that create most fear. I find such statistics helpful in trying to understand the extent of the problem, what underlies the high emotion on this topic, and indeed what remedy might be appropriate. But I don't suppose for a moment that these figures reduce the anxiety and anger around the topic amongst the rioters and indeed many of our fellow citizens. Which all seems rather a difficult backdrop to Refugee Week, which starts next week. This year's theme is courage. The word courage comes from the Latin cor, meaning heart. Inspired by the lives, the journeys, the experiences of people seeking sanctuary, Refugee Week 2026 invites us to reflect on what it means to act with courage in our everyday lives and communities. This year's theme recognizes the bravery that it takes to begin again, to speak out, to reach out, to stand alongside one another in solidarity. And it celebrates not only the courage shown by people seeking sanctuary, but also the courage found in kindness, connection, creativity, and community. The challenge this poses seems particularly stark against the background of current unrest. There are lots of ways of joining in Refugee Week events here in Norwich, including our service on the theme at St Peter Mancroft next Sunday, and visiting the display of 1,000 Acts of Hope, which will be in the Forum next week. You may remember that there were some cards to fill in here. Indeed, if you want to fill one in, I have some here. Write something positive that you've seen or done in your community, it suggests. So there's still time to take one of these, fill it in, and pop it into one of the boxes in the Forum. They'll be putting them up on Sunday, and they'll be up all week. Small acts of care often go unnoticed, but they help build the foundation of a compassionate community. The Hope Happens Here campaign, of which this is part, has collected messages of solidarity from across Norwich and beyond. You're particularly invited to join Norwich City of Sanctuary and New Roots Integration on Thursday next week, on the 18th, to view the display, to share your own message if you haven't done that before, and to celebrate the spirit of welcome that there is across Norfolk. And the display is part of a national 1 million Acts of Hope, which are being collected next week. So this year more than ever, it seems important to celebrate the contribution which refugees make to our community, and to make sanctuary seekers feel welcome, while we also have to acknowledge the anxiety and fear that are very real, however much we disapprove of the groups which may be stirring things up. I talked yesterday to a member of our Deanery Synod who sees the working out of his faith through his employment with St Martin's Housing Trust, helping homeless people directly in Norwich. Most of us don't have that opportunity, and like me, you may be a bit nervous about getting directly involved, even if we know the right way to do so. How do we show compassion for other people, especially those who seem very different to us, from us? I found the following suggestions helpful. Perhaps compassion looks less like heroic achievement and more like paying attention. Perhaps it looks like noticing who is missing from the table, listening before speaking, learning a name, even when it's a strange one and difficult to get into your head, perhaps especially then, sharing a meal, crossing a boundary, choosing curiosity over judgment, standing alongside rather than standing above. In a divided and often fearful world, compassion begins with seeing the person in front of us, seeing the image of God within them, seeing Christ in the stranger, and being blessed as a result. Thank you for listening, if you have been, as Frank Muir used to say. I wish you every blessing for the rest of your day, and indeed for celebrating Refugee Week next week. Thank you.